stage, and he said, "Can I come along as well?" Of course you can, Steve. No problem. And we went, and by that stage, Margaret, my wife at the time, had come along to Rosetta. There was about, well, nice wee company. But after the Rosetta, we usually went back to my house and had a few drinks and a few laughs and stuff or whatever. And Steve wanted to go, and we said, well, okay, but you'll have to follow the taxi, because he was still on his wee Vespa scooter, that he had arrived in to do the rehearsal. And there were no taxis available. It's, my house from the Rosetta back then was about it was about 2 miles or whatever, some Ballyhackamore, and we managed to get, I think, 8 people onto his Vespa scooter, 3 at the back, 1 each side. It was like one of those sort of, you ever see those sort of army presentation things on motorcycles where there's about 6 guys, doing these acrobatics and stuff? Well, it was like that, going along the knock dual carriageway with about, seriously, 8 people hanging off this wee and then back to her, and that's whenever he became like a real friend, sort of thing, like a real friend. And then he would come along to everything. He organised a gig then in Whitehead, and we went along and played it. And he was starting to find his feet, as far as he was still playing drums and stuff, but he was starting to find his feet where the business side of music was concerned, rather than the playing side. And then he kind of disappeared for a while, so it was like, in all honesty, nobody really gave it much thought. Obviously, when a friend disappears, you go, well, where is he going to? But back then, we were all sort of like real young and stuff, and it wasn't as if you had a mobile phone to go, where are you, sort of thing, and whatever. But so things, plus what we all had other things to do, and then I got this call from Steve, and this was like, I don't know how many years later, and he said, I'm coming over to Belfast, and I go, well, where are you now? And he says, I'm in London. And what are you doing coming over to Belfast? I'm coming over with Echo and the Bunnymen. It was a big band at the time, and Steve was championing them. And they were playing in Belfast, and Steve had arranged it because, unbeknownst to us, he'd went over and started up an agency, a music agency. So it was I'm not sure whether it was Helter Skelter at that time or whatever it was, maybe before that, sort of thing. But he was working for Helter Skelter anyway, and he was working with some big acts. But if he was in Belfast and the big act were staying in a hotel, I mean, we were in or he was staying in the same hotel where Line of Duty and stuff, some of the scenes were set. This was like way before then. And we would go along, and the suite was opened, and there were beers, and he was providing everything. And part of me was saying, this is really lovely, of a guy doing this. But part of me was also saying, this is a guy who wants to show everybody who thought he was a wee, white motorbike jacket, wiry haired guy, who couldn't get the gig, that he had done well for himself. And but I applauded that, I mean, I really did. And at the time, I just released the first Storm Zone album, Caught in the Act, had just been released, and I played it for him in the hotel room then with Echo and the Bunnymen, and nice wee group of people listening to it, and it's a melodic album anyway. And he went, "That's great." He says, "I'll tell you what, do you fancy going on tour with Tesla?" And I'm going, "What?" Well, yes. or maybe it was Y&T at the time. And I'm going, you're saying that, but how do we go about that? He says, they're my bands. I go, what? So he started going, listing the bands that he was now looking after. And I was going, my God, one of the things that I remember though is that he he had a little brief stint with Saxon back in Desi Cassidy will remember this. So he had a brief stint with Saxon. I think it was 1990 or whatever. We were always playing in a place back then in Belfast called Vico's, right at the very top. And Vico's was great. You used to go along, and there was like an attic, but you played in front of about 50 or 60 people. And there's a lot of them were just sitting on the ground watching you playing. But the fee was, you got pizza because it was a pizzeria. Vico was an Italian sort of, it was a restaurant, but with the venue at the very top. So you got pizza and 120 quid or something. But this was like 1990, so it was a nice wee fee sort of thing. So Desi and I befriended Vigo, so we would go down and watch FA Cup finals, and Lindsay, my daughter, she would go down, and if me and Desi were having a beer, Tina, the head waitress, would bring Lindsay in to show her pizzas being made and stuff. And this day the phone rang. Vigo, he was a complete 100% Italian, so I mean, if he would ask you, how do you make spaghetti bolognese, and I would say, well, the minced beef, the spaghetti, the tomatoes, and I put the mushrooms in, and he went, the mushrooms? So you don't put mushrooms in spaghetti bolognese. He said, it's just basically I was a heathen, for not keeping things simple where Italian cuisine was concerned. But this day the phone rang anyway, and Desi and I were going, wonder who that is. So Figo, he lifts up the phone, goes, what? And puts the phone down. So he comes over, and me and Desi go, you okay? And he went, yeah. He's just some guy shouting his mouth off about about this band or whatever. And I said, well, who was it? Because keep the momentum of the thing going. And he went, some guy called Steve Strange. He says, and he wanted to know if a band called Saxon could play here. And and I said, well, what was all the shouting about? He says he wanted £300, and I went, well, that's not that bad, He says, no. He says, I tell him, you get a pizza and £120 like all the other bands, and and obviously they didn't come over, but that's I mean that was Steve at his work, sort of back then,